Welcome to L'Dor Va-Dor's Chat with Two Rabbis. We are so happy tonight because we have with us Rabbi Barry Silver, and we have our guest rabbi, Rabbi Loring J. Frank, with us. And it is May 18th. Chai. Happy Shavuot, Chag Sameach Shavuot, and take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's always a pleasure to be here with a chat with two rabbis. Usually I have an Orthodox rabbi sitting with me, and today I have a very unorthodox rabbi, Rabbi Frank. His father and my father were very good friends, and among the first rabbis in the country to officiate at interfaith weddings. Today, the two of us continue in our father's footsteps, officiating at interfaith weddings and doing things a little bit differently in a slightly unorthodox manner compared to other rabbis. Loring, Frank, and I agree on many things and disagree on others, but one of my favorite things about Rabbi Frank is back in the old days, one of my favorite TV shows was the Beverly Hillbillies. And the Beverly Hillbillies had a song, a theme song that I use very often to write songs for brides and grooms and others. But they also had someone who was Jewish. Her name was Ellie May. Eli means my God, and May means the waters of. So the waters of my God. She was very refreshing. And then you had a guy named Jethro, who was the father-in-law of Moses. And I have now Loring Jethro Frank right here with us. He is a wonderful rabbi, very exciting, and a wonderful speaker. And so I thought I'd have him come and share some thoughts with us today. We're going to talk about Naso, we're going to talk about Israel, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the world, anything else, and whatever you would like to discuss. So I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Frank to say hello, then I'll talk a little bit about Naso, and then he can straighten me out and correct me where I went wrong on Naso, and then we'll talk Israel, and we'll open it up to everybody else. Rabbi Frank, welcome to the show.
Shalom, shalom, everyone. What a joy to be with you this day. This is a day that God has made, and today is a day we assemble. As you said, Rabbi Silver, this Chai Day, L'Chaim Day, the 18th of May. So let's all rejoice together and wish everyone a mazel tov and congratulations that we are experiencing one another through modern technology, which we say Chai Tech, like L'Chaim, today's date, Chai Tech, through our internet. And I'm so delighted to be with you once again. And Rabbi Silver, Sam Silver, and Rabbi Emmett Frank were the best of friends, as Rabbi Barry and I are the best of friends. We support one another. He supports me more than I support him because he's a lot more intelligent. He's an attorney. He helps me out with a lot of legal issues and rabbinical questions. So I'm just delighted to be with Barry today. I refer to him as Barry, so please understand. I know you refer to him as Rabbi, so we're delighted to be together. I want you to know that when you mentioned my name, Loring Jethro Frank, why do you suppose that an accomplished rabbi like my dad would name their son Jethro when Jethro was not an Israelite? He was not Jewish. Obviously, he was Moses' father-in-law. But why would my father name me Jethro?
All right, go ahead, answer that.
I'm going to put it out to our congregation. Any ideas? Have you heard of anyone ever known as Jethro, a Jewish person by Jethro or Yitro? So why would my father name me I'm not saying it to be derogatory, a Goyish name?
All right, solve the mystery, Loring. What is it?
Because I was born February 6, 1950, and the Sidra, the Torah reading, was Yitro. And my father said, I'm going to name my son Yitro. It's a very special Torah reading, almost as special as today with Naso, because Naso is the Torah reading in which God tells Moses and his brother Aaron the Kohanim Prayer, the Priestly Benediction. And we're going to talk about that in a few moments also. So let's turn the service back over to Rabbi Silver and to his blessed congregation, his holy and wonderful congregation, L'Dor Va-Dor. From generation to generation, the flame of our faith is being passed down thanks to your congregation and to your wisdom. God bless you.
Yitro is an interesting passage also because it's named after a non-Jew and it contains the 10 Commandments, which indicates to us that the 10 Commandments are not just for the Jewish people, but for everyone. And so it is that the Christians and Muslims both have adopted the 10 Commandments, and so have many other people across America and across the world.
There's one commandment, I just want to add, that gives you a reward for following it. Does anyone know what commandment it is that when you follow that commandment, you are rewarded? Are you rewarded for one of the other commandments? Actually, there's only one commandment that gives you a reward, and it spells out the reward in the commandment. So, dear congregation, holy congregation, which commandment gives you a reward in the 10 Commandments?
Honoring your parents.
That's it. What's the reward?
Love from your parents, unending love by your parents.
Even better than that, what's the reward? There are two rewards. One reward is that you'll have a long life and you'll have a prosperous life. And that is a very special blessing, that you can honor your mom and dad. And I can see some of you in our beautiful Zooming probably have parents that aren't with you physically, right? Am I right? They're in Shemayim, in God's heavens, and we can still honor our mom and dad by honoring their legacy and their memory, and God will grant you a long life and a prosperous life. That's a good thing to pass down L'Dor Va-Dor to your children, and to them, their children, to honor your mother and your father. And I see a few people that might be grandparents, so we can throw that in too. Grandparents and great-grandparents, we can add to that.
There's another part of the 10 Commandments, which is frequently used by fundamentalist Christians and tried to be inserted into our schools and our public buildings and courthouses, that says if you do good, God will remember your good deeds for 1,000 generations. And if you do bad things, he'll remember it for 3 generations, which actually knocks out the concept of original sin, because Adam supposedly lived a lot more than 3 generations before anyone here. So the concept of original sin is defied by the very commandments that many people try to put all over the place, which contradicts the entire basis for their religion. But let's talk about Naso a little bit. Loring, you want to share some thoughts about the priestly benediction?
Sure. You know, the priestly benediction is handed down from father to son as Kohanim. Anyone watching is a Kohen? Is anyone a Kohen? Is anyone a Bat Kohen, a daughter of Kohen? Well, you know, many times when I describe the Kohanim, or describe the hierarchy, if you will, of Israelites, many people don't know, but as we know, the high priest of Kohanim are the high priest, Kohanim, and right, I don't want to say below, or right next to the Kohanim, or the assistants to one another, the Levites, and then the vast majority of all the Israelites are called Israelites. So we have 3 hierarchies that were handed down from father to son, not down to mother to daughter or mother to son, but father to son. And although it's not handed down from the mother, a mother still can receive the Kohanim title by saying she is a Bat Kohen, a daughter of a Kohen. So that, in essence, gives her a special significance, and what's even better, to be a Bat Kohen and a Rebbitzin at the same time. I wonder if that's possible.
You know how you get to be a Levi? It's in your genes. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about
the priestly benediction.
Naso. You want to talk about the priestly benediction?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Now, the priestly benediction was originally for only the Kohanim. And now, through the miracle of knowledge and the passing down of Torah from L'Dor Va-Dor, and passing down the Torah and the words in the Torah to other religions, the Cohanim prayer has become universal in nature. So I know a lot of people that say the Cohanim prayer and they're not Kohen. So being that I'm a Kohen, I'm going to say that's fine. I'm not going to hold that to be a patent over a title of Kohanim. So let's give the Cohanim prayer. So the Cohanim prayer is a very special, it only actually offers one, if you will, blessing, only one quality of a blessing. It doesn't offer health or happiness, prosperity. It offers one key word, which is the word for all blessings. And you could be phenomenally rich, but if you're not at shalom, at peace, then it's meaningless. You could be phenomenally blessed with many, many wonderful qualities of good health, but if you don't have inner peace, shalom, then that really negates it all. So we pray for peace, no matter what is our situation in life. So the Kohanim prayer is, now when the Kohanim offer this benediction, and I know it, very well, I give it out every time I have a special event, whatever it is, weddings, funerals, baby namings, whatever. The Kohanim hold up their hands like this. You've probably seen the Kohanim like this, right? And when they hold up this hand, do you notice what Hebrew letter that is? It's a Shin. I heard, is that Emily?
Yeah.
I heard you say Shin. I didn't hear you say it, but I saw your lips go Shin. Oh, yeah. And I see, is there a Wendy Frank? Are we related, Wendy Frank? Okay. Okay. Well, the Cohen prayer, when we hold up our hand like this, it's a Shin. Now, as you know, every mezuzah, does everyone have a mezuzah on the doorpost of their home or bedroom? Every mezuzah has a Shin on it, a Shaddai, which stands for God or Adonai. So when the Kohanim offer the benediction, they symbolically, unless I have something else in my other hand, like sometimes I have a book in my other hand, so I can't do both hands. I can hook hand up my one hand, right hand, and the second hand like this. So you see two shins?
Yep.
But how many shins, if I just do it like this, how many shins are there now? Two. Look at my head and my arms as an extension. So it's a triple Shaddai, triple blessing, like we say, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. So we say a triple Shin, triple Shaddai. And the Kohanim, symbolically, when they do this prayer, everyone symbolically, they don't have to, generally speaking, closes their eyes and accepts the prayer. And the Kohanim also, when they're saying this prayer, generally speaking, closes his eyes. So we say, Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, which means may God bless you and keep watch over you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'choneka, may God's presence shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yisad Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha, and here's the word, Shalom. Amen. May God watch over you, dear friends, L'Dor Va-Dor, all humanity, all Israel, throughout the world, Shalom, peace. And we say, Amen. And then to firm that up, we say, Kain Yehi Rotzon, and so it shall be.
Emily, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if you're a Trekkie rabbi. I know Rabbi Silver is.
Of course.
Does it live long and prosper?
Actually, I want you to know, I read about Leonard Nimoy,
Yes.
and he saw his rabbi do this at the synagogue.
And so
And that's how he got the idea, live long and prosperous, but if he said, it's the Cohen Prayer, then the show might have been kicked off the air because it's too Jewish, or something like that, or too religious. So I have a picture, believe it or not, I have a picture of Leonard Nimoy with a talit on,
oh wow,
and his kippah on, and he's going like this. Isn't that phenomenal? It's pretty.
Leonard Nimoy wanted to insert Judaism into Star Trek surreptitiously because he understood that Star Trek represents Jewish values. William Shatner also is Jewish. So this was his way of inserting it. It was something that he saw as a kid and it reminded him of his Judaism. The Birkat Kohanim, the priestly benediction, originally was just offered by the priests, as Rabbi Frank says, but today it's ubiquitous. It's used by Muslims, it's used by Jews, it's used by Christians, it's used when a pope is installed, and it's also used at the inauguration of a president. So it is used universally, and of course it's usually recited in English, but it has a prayer that has universal applications. Now there's a lot more in this passage also besides the Birkat Kohanim. There's also in this passage something called the sota. Sota is if the man suspects his wife of being unfaithful and she becomes pregnant and he thinks it's not his child, he takes the wife to the priest, and the priest does some type of magical incantation and writes something down on paper, and then has a potion and gives it to the woman. If the child that she's carrying, if the unborn child is not of her husband's, she suffers a miscarriage. It doesn't quite use those terminology, but it says that her belly extends and then the fetus is lost. Otherwise, if it's his, no harm, no foul. So it's some kind of mystical, divine opportunity to find out what the truth is.
It doesn't mean that if you had a miscarriage, God forbid, that it wasn't your husband.
Well, what it does mean is that for those people who claim that the Bible is anti-choice, they're wrong. In this passage, in Naso, God performs an abortion. And God performs an abortion specifically for children born out of wedlock. So you could very easily draw the conclusion that to God, fetus conceived out of wedlock should be aborted, and therefore abortion is not against the Bible. It's actually consistent with the Bible. There's other passages in the Bible that show that the Bible respects a woman's right to choose. Now we have fundamentalist Christians who are ignorant of the Bible or twist it and have stacked the Supreme Court to try to do away with the woman's right to choose. That would be a very, very scary thing, a very dangerous thing, very harmful to our country, and it would also defy Jewish law, which would deny a woman's right to choose and have the government impose its will upon us. There's another part of the Torah that's very interesting here in Naso. It deals with something called the Nazarite. The Nazarite was a very special person committed to God. And to show that commitment, he forswears any wine. He's not allowed to drink wine, and is not supposed to cut his hair. So he looks kind of like a hippie. Yeah, my hair is a little bit long. The thing that's interesting about the Nazarite is that, remember, Hebrew originally was written without vowels. And so Jesus kind of takes on the characteristics of a Nazarite, someone who probably might not have cut his hair, someone who led a pure life, and someone who supposedly was dedicated to holiness. If that's the case, that could explain why in Christian scripture it says he was born in Bethlehem, but then it also says that he was from Nazareth. What a lot of scholars believe is that there's no contradiction. He was born, according to Christian scripture, in Bethlehem, but he was a Nazarite. Nazareth is the same thing as someone born in Nazareth. And so the people who created the Christian scripture had no idea, they didn't understand Hebrew, so they thought Nazarite meant that he was born in Nazareth. So they had to go through all types of convolutions in order to get him into Nazareth somehow by creating a story that there was a census and everybody had to return to their father's home. The story is completely made up. That never happened in Rome. They never would have sent people around back to their homeland or the fathers. So the story is made up because people didn't really understand what it meant to be a Nazarite. I'll take any comments, questions now about the Torah reading, and then we'll talk Israel. Anybody have any comments or questions so far? Okay, and then go ahead, Sharon.
Yes.
So how do you find out if you're a daughter of a Kohen?
Good question.
No
Very simply.
How do you know that?
Very simply. No, very simply. Is your father still living?
No.
Does your father have a brother?
Not
alive. Is he still living?
No.
He passed away?
All of them.
Did your father have a son? You have a brother?
Yeah, my brother.
You could ask him. He may know. He may know, whereas the daughter might not know. Also, it could be on his bar mitzvah certificate. It even could possibly be on his ketubah. Now, what about your mother?
Pass.
Now, it could be too that on their ketubah, the mom and dad's ketubah, it could have on there. And Barry and I have read ketubahs for years. He's always helped me out with the Hebrew. And sometimes it says the father or the groom's name, his Hebrew name, and it has at the end HaKohen, a Kohen, or Levite, or an Israelite. So it would be passed down. Now, do you say you have a brother? You say
yes.
So he might know, and if he has a son, then the son would be a Kohen also, or a Levite, or an Israelite.
Okay.
So now the Kohanim also, being that I am a Kohen, have special requirements, if you will, that they must quote unquote follow if they're very religious. Number one is, of course, that they can't be around any symbolic negativity, so to speak, that they have to keep themselves higher and a higher level and be pure and so on and so forth, which means in essence, you're not supposed to be around dead bodies or dead people, and just to keep yourself clean and pure. And so some Kohanim who are very religious won't even go into a cemetery unless they are staying on the road and not going onto the Bet Chaim, if you will, the cemetery, the house of the living. But they're not really.
That's why Loring tends to wear white. He's pure as the driven snow.
But I do walk on graves at the or go to the cemeteries, so I don't follow along with it. If I did, I probably wouldn't be that much in, a demand as a rabbi, because I would never be doing any funerals, and I do hundreds of funerals, a year sometimes.
I'm just a bit more skeptical than Rabbi Frank. I guess it's the attorney in me. I have a sneaking suspicion that after 3,000 years, many people are completely clueless about these claims about to be descended from a Kohen. And so there's blood tests that you could do that they don't even know about that, but I'm very, very dubious about any claims to be descended from Aaron. I'm not even sure whether Aaron actually existed. Maybe he did, but.
It's a nice symbolism though.
It
doesn't have to be exactly right. I mean, for example, we don't have to be exactly following Judaism one way or the other. In fact, if someone asks you your religion, what would you say? What is your religion? What would you say?
Jewish.
What would you say?
Jewish.
Jewish, right? Now, if someone asked a Christian person, what's your religion? They would say Baptist, Presbyterian,
Right.
Catholic, but they never, ever, ever add the ISH at the end. They don't say Baptist-ish.
No.
They don't say Catholic-ish. It's like someone saying, what time is it? And you say 5-ish. That means it's like not exactly 5. So if you say you're Jewish, you really aren't proclaiming anything demonstratively. You say, I'm Jewish. It's like, well, I mean, I was born Orthodox.
I'm sort of a Jew.
Sort of. So when at the High Holiday service, when I have an opportunity to speak to a lot of people at the same time, I say to them this story about being Jewish and what's your religion? And I said, what is it about us that we just can't say I'm a Jew or I'm Jew, I'm Catholic? They don't say I'm a Catholic. Maybe they do. I'm Catholic, I'm Jew. So after I give this little talk about that, then people walk up to me sometimes in the street, Rabbi, I came to High Holidays and I'm Jew. They don't say Jewish, because it's almost as like maybe our prejudice that had been happening toward us over the years, that we're kind of afraid to say, I'm Jew, I'm Jewish, don't pin the deal on me completely, but I'm just Jewish, and I could be, real ultra one way or real ultra the other way if I wanted. So,
Wendy, you had a question or a comment?
I just wanted to respond. It's a pleasure meeting you. It's Rabbi. It's Rabbi Frank, not Frank's, right?
Are we related, Wendy?
I doubt it. Are you from Philly?
My uncle is. My uncle's a rabbi in Philly, Rabbi Bernard Frank. He was
well,
at Beth Torah. At Beth Torah.
I was related by marriage. I mean, Frank is my married name. Was my married name. But anyway, it's a pleasure meeting you. And I didn't respond because I was driving. So I'm home now, trying to get the computer on because I was
You're
just
devoted and dedicated to this Zoom.
All right.
Yes, I am. They know I am.
I have a question that if I may. Yeah. I think especially in modern times, when I say modern times, maybe the past 50, 60 years, maybe, the word Jew always had a negative or demeaning connotation. Oh, you're a Jew. And so that's very possible why the ish might have been added. I mean, every time I've heard older people or other cultures refer to us and they use the term Jew, everybody took sort of offense to it in some way. So,
but I want to just say something. I'm going to say in deference to that, I know a lot of Christian people who, they say their religion, they say I'm Christian, so they don't know to add the ish at their name, Christian-ish. So when they say Jew-ish, they look at the Christian, the Baptist, and they leave off the ish when it comes to Jew, but they don't say it derogatory. We're the one that's taking it derogatorily, and we don't stand up for who we are. I'm a Jew. You know, I'm a Hebrew, or I'm a Jew. I'm Jewish. But I do say I'm Jewish, but I just want you to know that the connotation in that could be more demonstrative Jew. Yes, that's Emily.
Well, I'm going to say things that are going to get you as usual. Okay. I object to the caste system of Kohen, Levi, and Israelite. I just don't like the whole born into a caste system. If we are Jews or Jewish,
yes,
we have a value system of kindness, saving the earth, being good to others, not stratifying each other into a caste system. I object to that.
I happen to agree with you, Emily. I think that the distinction might have made sense in ancient days when there were priests with certain functions, but today, I'm not sure if it's productive. Let's talk about Israel, all right?
I'm sorry. I just want to apologize to you.
No, I don't apologize at all, because, you know, because that I am a Cohen doesn't mean I'm what you're talking about. You know, I'm kind of born into it. If someone said, I object to you being a Jew, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? I mean, you know, you can say, okay, I'm not a Jew anymore. You know, I'm not going to say I'm not a Cohen anymore, because I have a special obligation as a Cohen in my eyes to give everyone a peaceful blessing. Now, let me ask you.
I am not a Kohen, and I would feel perhaps I have an obligation to give all of you a peaceful blessing.
Good.
Good. Elitism.
That's good. You know, I know a lot of Kohanim, and I asked them, give me the Kohanim prayer, because I'd like to have that prayer, like in the Torah, bless me, Father, bless me, bless me, bless me. And so people say, Rabbi, give me a blessing, give me a Kohanim. But I asked them if they're a Kohen, they said, yes, and give me a Kohanim prayer. They go, I don't know what it is. So they don't have to be, even if they said they're Kohanim or not, I'd like to get, may God bless you and keep watch over you. May you, and I like to add in there, may you be blessed with effulgence, a ray of light. And after I say that prayer, which I just said a few moments ago with you, guess what I said under my breath? I said, and me too.
And me too.
Blessing myself. He who blesses receives the blessing. Now, I want to...
Emily, you're correct that the traditional Jews tend to pay attention to that distinction, whereas the Reform and the modern Jews no longer consider that distinction to be one of any significance. It's more significant to traditional conservative Orthodox Jews, like Reconstructionists, Reform, those folks don't really know. But I do want to talk about Israel. So, Rabbi Frank, I'm going to ask you to speak about Israel, or else I will.
I want to ask, if we're going to be speaking about Israel, we use the name Israel, the word Israel, in our Jewish traditions every Shabbat, every, you know, major holiday, of course, and holidays, when we say the Shema, right? So let's say the Shema. Shema Yisrael, right? Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, right?
Right.
Is that right?
Yep.
Now, what does that translate to? Someone
Hero
just say.
Israel.
Hero Israel. The Lord is our God. The Lord is one.
Okay, but there's one word you didn't translate. I asked you to translate that prayer, but there's one word you still did not translate.
I don't know.
No, we said, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. So what word is not translated?
Israel. I don't know.
What we're talking about today, Israel. In other words, you said the word Israel, it's a Hebrew word, but what does Israel mean? There's a beautiful meaning in the word Israel. Now, of course, we know it to be the country Israel, but if you knew what the meaning of Israel is, it wouldn't relate only to the country Israel, it would relate to all of humanity. Because Israel means, and Rabbi Silver knows, when you struggle with God, the name was changed from Jacob, was it? To Israel. From Jacob to Israel. When you struggle with God, or you struggle with God's ways, you become an Israelite. In other words, an Israelite means one who strives, sometimes struggles to comprehend God's ways, or if you don't want to use the word God, just, you know, ways of life. In other words, you might have a wonderful attitude about life, but if something, God forbid, happens that's not 100% in your eyes the way it should be, you're struggling with God or with life or with nature or with the universe, and you become an Israelite because you're struggling with God's ways. And the only way to get out of that struggle, dear friends, is to have a faith, to have faith. To betachon in amun, to have faith and trust. You could say God, you can leave out God, you could say life, you can say anyway. To have faith and trust in nature, faith and trust in the universe, because if you have faith and trust in the universe, you will know at all times, good, bad, and different, what we think it is, everything is hakol b'seder. Everything is in perfect order, just the way it's supposed to be. It might be the way we want it to be, but it's the way it's supposed to be. So we become an Israelite.
I've asked Rabbi Frank to comment on Israel 3 times so far. I haven't got a response yet. And I don't want to divert, but I can't let that go without just saying that I believe the way to comprehend the power behind all of this is by not having faith. It's by having doubt and by questioning and by asking. And that's to me what Yisrael means. It means to always ask and always wonder and not have faith, because once you have faith, then the truth is unavailable to you, because you already know the way. You have faith in a certain path, and then the path of truth is not open to you. And I certainly don't have faith that everything's happening as it should. Otherwise, I'd have to say that the Holocaust should have happened, which it shouldn't have. So I reject that whole concept, but that's not what we're here to talk about. And ask you one more time, Rabbi Frank, to talk about Israel.
Like the current state of Israel?
What's happening now in Israel, and then I will share my comments, and we're going to open up to everybody else.
Well, I mean, on the surface, it seems that Israel is doing the right thing, not by bombing and killing, God for people, innocent people, whatever, but they're doing the right thing, and that is what probably any country or any person would do. They would defend themselves. And so I feel that Israel is doing its best to defend itself, to stop the horrific, indiscriminate bombing on cities in Israel. And in order to do that, they've had to either have current and in the past espionage, if you will, ways to find out who is launching these bombs or missiles or where they are and so on. So I understand that that there's quite a bit of like espionage that's been going on for a while. Israel has been preparing for this in many ways, but certainly now that Israel is responding, now, unfortunately, through the efforts of, if you will, press or propaganda or whatever, they're getting a bad reputation, particularly when they bombed that building that had the AP News. Did you hear about that? The AP News was in this building. Well, now it's coming out that the AP News, which is a news gathering organization, knew, even though they said they did not know, knew that the Hamas was in that building also making bombs and doing certain things that were, against Israel. So, I mean, again, you could say that's true, not true, and so on. I tend to err on the side of Israel, that they are saying the truth more so than the terrorist organization who have as their mantra, so to speak, to destroy Israel and destroy Jews. And I go along with Golda Meir when she said, we are so pitied by the Hamas, and we're so much rejected by the Hamas that they want to kill our children, they want to kill everyone. But what's worse than that is that when we have to bomb and kill their children. So I like what Golda Meir said about that, and I know Israel's in a very tenuous position and unfortunate. So I think they have a right to defend themselves in whatever means it is, and that's my personal feeling about what's going on right now.
Well, I think we're pretty much in alignment. I just want to refine your last statement. You said they have the right to defend themselves, whatever means that is. Is there anything that Israel's doing that you disagree with, or do you think everything they're doing is proper?
Well, I don't know the underlying, reasons and so on, and intelligence going on, but I can just say on the surface that I'm sure and I believe that Israel is doing the best they can to protect life, not only in their country, in Israel, but also in Palestine.
All right. Let me share some thoughts on that, and then we're going to open up to everybody else. First of all, I do agree with Rabbi Frank primarily, and we're pretty much on the same page. Israel has an absolute right to defend herself, and Israel is dealing with a terrorist organization, and the world seems to have lost sight of that. I just want to mention, though, that just because Israel has the right to defend herself, and just because Israel is dealing with terrorists, doesn't ipso facto mean that everything Israel does is perfect and that there's no room for improvement. Just like the blacks have suffered from slavery and oppression, but that doesn't mean everything that every black person does, including supporting Farrakhan or sometimes being anti-Israel, is legitimate. And sometimes you can be very much wronged and respond to it and have the right to respond to it, but you might not respond to it in the best manner. So let me just say that I 100% agree with Israel's right to defend herself, and I think that the media has completely lost track of what's going on. I watch MSNBC, I watch CNN, I watch Fox. I never hear, well, rarely, let me say rarely, on MSNBC and CNN, I don't hear them mention the fundamental point that Hamas has in its charter its desire to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews. That should be mentioned like every segment. I did hear it once. I did hear it once on MSNBC watching Morning Joe. Joe Scarborough mentioned it, and he also mentioned some other things about the crisis, taking Israel's side, which I really appreciated. Then he said a couple of negative comments, but it's not said very often, and it should be. It's also not said that Israel gave up all the land of Hamas, gave it back to the Palestinians, and then they used it to dismantle all the greenhouses, and they used it to launch missiles. And the aid that they get right now, instead of feeding people and doing education, they're using it to build missiles and tunnels. This is despicable. And this is the main issue. This is why there's not peace. Also, it's completely hypocritical. And I said this inside of a mosque. I went to a local mosque recently, and I was speaking about the situation. And the imam was saying things that Israel was doing that were improper. And he said Israel actually invaded the sanctity of the Al-Aqsa Mosque on Ramadan. Said, how terrible is that Israel did? I said, well, not nearly as terrible as the Muslims using it as a storage place for weapons and throwing stones and launching weapons from the mosque on Ramadan. I said, that was the tragedy, and that invited a response from Israel, but they kind of forgot all about that, and that's the whole problem.
I think Hamas just purposely launches their rockets from schools, hospitals,
yeah, absolutely.
from buildings that house, peaceful means and so on.
They launch it from civilian areas, and that's what they did in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I do want to say this, though, that while I 100% agree with Israel's right to defend itself, and I don't think Israel should tolerate a terrorist group on its border, and I think that the United States should join forces with Israel to take out Hamas, to liberate the Palestinians in Gaza from Hamas. I do believe that. I also think that Israel hasn't responded properly, and I'm not, in some ways, and I'm not the only one. There's retired Israeli generals and defense people and everything else who said that some of what they're doing is not a good idea. And I'll just mention this primarily. You have Israel being attacked by the battalions of the brainwashed and the armies of the indoctrinated. And they're attacked by people who think God wrote the Quran, and they interpret the Quran to mean that Israel belongs to them, they should kill the Jews. Fighting against this, the only way to fight against it effectively is with reason, to challenge the idea that God wrote the Quran with reason. Instead, you have Jews, Orthodox Jews, militant Jews on the other side saying, no, you're wrong. God didn't write the Quran, he wrote our book. And our book tells us how to deal with foreigners in Israel. And according to our book, God ordered the death of 7 nations because they were worshiping the wrong God in the Holy Land. And so modern Jews today, Orthodox, who look to the Torah, think, oh, the way to deal with these people is to kill them. And there have been Jews running around saying death to the Arabs, not just saying it, carrying it out. Jewish mobs hauling people out of cars and beating them to death. This is shocking, it's disgraceful, it's against everything Israel stands for, and it totally ruins the PR war. That's not the worst of it. The worst thing is they're just doing things that are horrific, but it harms Israel. And now you have Palestinians and Israelis within Israel fighting against each other. And that is extremely dangerous. The greatest thing about Israel is that we could always say the best treated Arabs, the only free Arabs, are living within Israel, and they're living peacefully with us. Today, we cannot make that claim. That's dangerous, and we need to restore order and peace so that we can once again have Jews and Muslims in Israel living together. That's why Israel was established, and that's what we should seek. Let's open it up to other people. Anybody else want to share some comments, thoughts, disagreements, agreements? Good, it's all yours.
Aris, I know you got to say something. Unmute
Harris,
yourself.
you're muted. Unmute yourself and speak up.
Well, nobody ever talks about the Palestinians. They've been living in Lebanon in tents since 1948, and they're treated horribly in Lebanon. And Israel has to, if they wanted to, in 2 days, they could invade Gaza and take over the whole country. It took them the 6-day war to beat 5 countries, so it'd be nothing for them to walk in. But they're looking at how the world feels about it. And most of the world are on the Gaza side. So they're restraining themselves. And they're doing a wonderful thing by throwing out leaflets, telling them where they're going to bomb so the people can get out of the way. But the worst thing is their Iron Dome system, which is supposed to intercept missiles, doesn't appear to be working at 100%. So hopefully they can look at the Iron Dome system after this whole thing is over. I think by this week, there'll be an agreement to stop all the shooting and killing and everything else.
You sound like you're from Philly, New Jersey. Where are you from, Philly?
I'm from Winfield.
Where's that?
Ever heard?
Pennsylvania?
It's in Philadelphia.
Okay, I got it. I want to ask you, you know, supposedly I was reading that this Iron Dome, that when a bomb is shot out of the air by another, rocket, that sometimes it doesn't even get a chance to leave, Palestine, so to speak, or the area, and it falls down to earth, and then that kills or maims people. And sometimes the bombs being shot off by the Hamas or whatever misfire and shoot into their own people, God forbid, like it has, and then we get blamed for that too. So it's like, I mean, what would we do if we were in Miami or Boca and 2,000 rockets came over from some area, who knows where, and what are we supposed to do? That's if someone comes after you with a gun, and then we have that. I don't necessarily agree with the law, but I certainly stand your ground. You know what I mean? I mean, what about stand your ground? Do we have a stand your ground in Israel?
Well, this is why I was so discouraged and really concerned when
One
AOC,
more thing, I just want to say, Israel is restraining themselves. Okay, total restraint on Israel's part. They bombed one big building, a couple other bombs if they wanted to, but they're not doing it, of course. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, Israel sends out warning leaflets and tells people in advance. And it is true that the Palestinians, Hamas is killing their own people with their own misfired missiles. But AOC said, and I wrote it down, the president and many other figures this week stated that Israel has the right to self-defense. And this is a statement that is shared across this body. But do Palestinians have a right to survive? Do we believe that? And if so, we have a responsibility to that as well. I just want it to be known that it's been said that Israel has the right to self-defense. She never said that she believes that. She never said, and I agree with that. So first of all, she's not agreeing that Israel has the right to self-defense. Then she's asking about the Palestinians. If you elect a terrorist group to represent you, and your goal is to wipe out the other side, how would you expect that there's going to be peace? So I think the Democratic Party should censure her and maybe toss her out of the party, because Israel lives up to the ideals of the Democratic Party: peace, justice, freedom, women's rights, rights for gays, equal rights. And Hamas is a terrorist group, and she is siding with the terrorist group, and she's acting like they really care about the Palestinians, which they don't. So this statement is shameful, and the Democratic Party and President Biden should condemn it and censure her. Then you have Bernie Sanders, who was born to Jewish parents, but I don't consider him to be Jewish. I consider him to be born Jewish, but he doesn't live a Jewish life. He said this: in the Middle East, where we provide nearly $4 billion a year in aid to Israel, we can no longer be apologists for the right-wing Netanyahu government and its anti-democratic and racist behavior. We must change course and adopt an even-handed approach, one that upholds and strengthens international law regarding the protection of civilians, as well as existing US law, holding that the provisions of US military aid must not enable human rights abuses. And I also find that outrageous to suggest that we should be even-handed when one side is launching missiles at the other and the other is defending themselves. This is wrong. You don't be even-handed when there's a right and a wrong situation. If you want to criticize, like I did, if you want to criticize something that Israel did, and Israel curried favor with militant right-wing groups to form a coalition, which kind of gave the green light to these right-wing thugs. You want to do that, that's fine. But don't say that you have to be even-handed when it comes to Israel and the Palestinians. That's not fine, and he should be condemned also. And I'm urging all the Democrats to contact your representatives and the president and tell them that this is unacceptable behavior by fellow Democrats, because we do not want to legitimize what these people are saying.
You know, and I don't usually talk politics out. I'm from Washington, D.C. All my friends were politicians. My dad gave the opening prayer at the Senate and the House, and my best friend was Mike Ford. His dad turned out to be President Ford, and we were all, in essence, Democrats standing up for equal rights back in the 50s and 60s. By the way, and just to add in, the president of the NAACP back in the 50s and 60s was a white Jewish man by the name of Kivi Kaplan. So we as Jews have stood up for the rights of all peoples. And going back to politics, sometimes you mention something about politics and all of a sudden you're pigeonholed into a certain area. But basically, I just wanted to make a statement. I know this is not being, maybe it will go over the internet throughout millions of people, but on one hand, I've always been a Democrat, and I think that the Democrat Party has left my vision of what I have felt to be, a Democrat. I don't really feel I can really honestly say I'm a Democrat anymore, seeing what's going on in the Democratic Party. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be on the Republican either, but I'm just saying I'm not as 100% Democrat and supportive of Democrats, particularly what Barry just mentioned. It doesn't mean he's not Democratic either, or a Democrat, but it certainly means that the Democrat Party has basically changed a lot from my original growing up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
And what it means is that whatever party we are, we need to put Jewish values, ideals, American values ahead of party. And when our party does wrong, criticize. The main problem is if you're Jewish and you can't criticize Israel, or you're American and you can't criticize the government, or you're Republican so you can't criticize your party, or Democrat. That's where the danger begins.
You know, as Jews, we don't realize it, but we do when you look into the history of the Russian pogroms, Spanish Inquisition, and Nazi Germany. It could happen, God forbid, in this country, but we as Jews are the minority of all minorities. When you think about it, we are the minority of all minorities. The only reason why, generally speaking, the Jew is not prejudiced against in greater ways is that we could blend into a crowd and we could hide our Judaism in many ways. So, but I just want you to know, when it comes time to attacking Jews or Israel, boy, we are the minority. If we don't stand up for ourselves, then no one will.
Well, in that vein, I am in the process of scheduling a rally for Israel. I invite all of you to join us. I have a good friend, Mark Boykin, over at the Church of All Nations, and we had a rally for Israel a few years ago when there were problems also with the world community in Israel, and I've spoken to him about it. Might be at his place or somewhere else, but we'll be having a rally for Israel, and it's going to be an interfaith rally. And I agree with Rabbi Frank. The two of us are absolutely on the same page. We all need to stand up for Israel and defend Israel. And that doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything Israel does. We should absolutely defend Israel at this time of need. Joel, go ahead.
The greatest support that we have, dear friends, fellow Jews, are our Christian brethren who love and defend Israel as much, if not more, as we do.
Yes.
So I'm just want you to know that the
Yes.
average Christian out there, and not pigeonholing and coming into one word or the other, is very supportive of Israel, and they would hate, God forbid, hate that something would happen to Israel, that they would lose their, quote, homeland of their faith of Christianity.
Well, it's the right wing. The right wing Christians basically support us, and the left wing, not so much. Go ahead, Joel.
Memories are short. 9/11, we were attacked.
Yeah.
And what did we wind up doing? We went into Afghanistan to get the people that perpetrated it. Then we went into Iraq because of the weapons of mass destruction and the support for those people. Memories are short. It is no different now. With the rockets coming over, were you supposed to just sit there and let the rockets fall?
No.
It's the same thing.
It's all being funded by Iran.
Absolutely. And the same people in Congress that are sitting there with their finger up their rear end are the same people that sent us over to Afghanistan to do what they did because of 9/11. And these memories are short. So it's good for the goose, but it's not good for the gander. I don't think that's the way it works.
Thanks, Joel. Couldn't agree more. Go ahead, Sharon.
So last week I happened to write to Lois Frankel about an issue. I still haven't heard from her, but what I got was a reply from her email that her email is so full that you have to be patient. She might be able to get back with me. Okay. So you said to get with these people. How do we go about doing that other than their email, Rabbi?
Well, contacting them one-on-one individually, like you've experienced, is really difficult. What they do in the congressional office, if you send a letter saying, I support Israel, or I want more money spent for Israel, whatever, they tally that up. It means something. They'll keep track of how many letters are getting one side or the other, but they might not get back to you each time. They might send you a form letter. But if people gather in rallies and make their voices heard collectively, they will pay attention. If there was a grassroots movement in Palm Beach County and there were like 5 or 6 or 10 rallies for Israel, they notice that and they pay attention to it. Because these are not just people who believe a certain way, they're willing to act on it and they're going to go out and vote on it. And so that's the way we do it. That's why at L'Dor Va-Dor, we have a lot of rallies and demonstrations, and that means something. And that definitely gets their attention. And we will invite Lois Frankel to comment or to attend or to send a representative, as well as Congressman Deutsch. And also, I want everyone to know, we are having tomorrow a candidate forum of a bunch of people running for Al C. Hastings' seat. And question number 1 is going to be, what's your take on Israel? It's going to be a very interesting question, because this is a seat that is gerrymandered to go right through the black area. So the candidates who are running are mostly, maybe even 100% African Americans. And many African Americans have not had our back. Many have not been pro-Israel. It's going to be very interesting to see how will they respond to what's going on in Israel today. So I encourage you to be there, to hold their feet to the fire. Because when we elect someone for Congress in that seat, we want that person to be pro-Israel. Go ahead, Emily.
The other thing is, I believe there's only one candidate from Palm Beach County running for that seat. There are several from Broward County, Broward-Dade area. And besides Israel, we have to look for what's going to happen in Palm Beach County. I mean,
I said that would be our first question, not our only question. We got a bunch of questions.
It's very important that we elect someone who's going to help us here as well. So,
well, I want to see somebody who's going to protect the ag reserve, someone who's going to help deal with climate change, and someone who's going to say, I want to help the Black community, but I'm willing to criticize the Black community. Like, I'm willing to criticize the excesses of Black Lives Matter. I'm willing to criticize the Black community if there's problems within the family, and I'm willing to address issues within my own backyard. I want someone who's going to be honest and have integrity. So thank you for bringing that out. I know you're going to have some great questions because you are very politically astute. So I'm hoping you'll be there to help ask some good questions.
Thank you.
Wendy.
Muted. Wendy? Oh, no, it's Valerie. There's Wendy.
She's
Hey,
on
Wendy,
here.
what are you cooking? I'm getting hungry.
No, I'm not cooking. I was eating a chicken that I bought, which was very good. You're right. There's some left. You like some?
You got to become vegan like we're vegan.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, several things. One, though Biden isn't giving much input before this happened, shortly before this happened, he did authorize hundreds of millions of arms to Israel. Also, he's been trying, from what I heard, to not tell either side what to do.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
The other thing, wait, can I mention one other thing?
Yes.
In terms of the Israel rally, all these rallies that you have, that I have wanted to attend in the past, I haven't felt safe at. So tell me how, with this rally, it's going to be safer. It's not like you're going to ask people to show their vaccine cards. People are going to be close in groups. You know, it's a rally. You can't, I don't know how people are going to be 6 feet apart in a rally. So,
you don't have to be 6 feet apart. If you wear your mask, you don't have to be 6 feet apart.
You don't have to wear a mask anymore. You're from Boston, right, Emily?
Oh, I'll never lose it. Never lose it. I parked my car in the Harvard yard.
You're from Marblehead?
Actually,
Rabbi
my
Frank
husband was from Marblehead, yes.
Rabbi Frank is very good at detecting accents. He can tell where you're from. He told me what street I was from in Stamford, Connecticut. As far as being safe is concerned, if you've had your vaccine, then you're pretty darn safe. But it's no longer the time for us to be safe. It's the time for us to take action, and a lot of times that means leaving your comfort zone. In Israel, they're not all that safe. So the least we can do is show up and express our opinion and voice our support for Israel, even if there is some, what I consider to be a minuscule risk. I happen to be more at risk than the average person, but I will be there. And if you want, you can be there with a mask, but we'll be there. We're also going to be there on Friday night, where we're having an in-person service. And because of what's going on in Israel, we will have some very patriotic songs sung as we celebrate Shabbat, and it's going to be a really great occasion. So I hope you can be there Friday night, 7 o'clock, Santa Lucis, in the little auditorium. We'll have a sign or something, and try to be there. We all need to stand up for Israel.
I have a quote from Golda Meir I just pulled up from my phone, and Golda Meir said, Alei Shalom, it should be a peace. If we choose between being dead and being pitied and being alive with a bad image, we'd rather be alive and have that bad image.
He was a very, very wise person, and it shows that Israel is a great country. It had the good sense to appoint a Jewish mother to be in charge.
If we would do anything not to stand up to the terrorists, I can assure you we would get criticized by the Christian community more so than even our own community, because they are 100% committed to the survival of Israel, not only because of their religion, but they know that their religion is the backbone and the foundation of Judaism is their religion. They know that.
Yeah, well, it's always good to have support everywhere, and the fundamentalist Christians are our best support. The liberal Christians, many of them side with the classic liberal position. Before I get to Harris, I just want to mention something else. President Biden. So if you listen to the right wing, they viciously attack Biden and say he's an enemy of Israel, he's horrible, he's this and that. That's not true. Right now, he's given the green light to Israel to defend herself and said that Israel has the right to self-defense. However, he is not nearly as strong as he should have been. He gave money to the Palestinians and to UNRWA, which they use in order to fund anti-Israel education, and in many cases pay off killers. That was a big mistake. He also has not offered to help replenish the missiles that are being used in the Iron Dome, and he's not doing enough to take Israel's side, in my opinion. I believe that we should urge President Biden to take a stronger position, and his Secretary of State, who's Jewish, Blinken, where is the guy? I mean, come on, this is Israel's time of need, and he's like...
This guy is Jewish with a name like Anthony?
Yeah, he's Jewish, and he's just taking a middle-of-the-road type of position. He needs to support Israel, and so does Biden, and we need to encourage them to do that if they don't. I was very happy to criticize Trump if I thought he did wrong, and I'm very happy to criticize Biden if I think he did wrong. To vilify him is not accurate, but he should be doing more.
By the way, there's a wonderful group. I know the head of the group. It's called Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. Keep that thought, Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. It is headed up by Lori Cardoza Moore, and she is a proponent of encouraging Christians to support Israel, and even more so to support Jews.
Well,
Barry, I don't know if you're aware, they're considering Robert Wexler for ambassador to Israel.
Yeah.
Congressman Wexler.
Wexler to do what?
Ambassador to Israel. He's under consideration. Were you aware of that?
I ran against Wexler.
I know you did. I know you did.
And I know him personally.
I know you do. So I'm giving you information.
I appreciate that information.
Okay.
Yeah, he would not be my first choice.
That's another point.
Go ahead, Harris.
Well, excuse my Philadelphia accent, but the House Democrats, and I sent an email to Barry, want to block Biden's proposal to send hundreds of millions of dollars in arms to Israel. And as I said, the House Democrats are now trying to block that. So
some of them.
Yes. So it's that is terrible. And I left Philadelphia 50 years ago. I guess you never lose your accent.
Nope.
That's good. How do you say GAS?
Gas?
It's always like a Z. G-A-Z-Z-Z, gas. Right.
Yeah, well, you're right, Harris. We got to hold their feet to the fire. Any Democrats who are saying that we shouldn't support Israel, we got to speak out against them and correct the record. Anybody else? I think we had a great discussion. We covered a lot of ground.
Let's do this again. I enjoy this.
It's great having Rabbi Frank here. Yeah, Rabbi Frank enjoys it, even though I sometimes ask tough questions because it's the attorney in me. He's dealing with a rabbi and an attorney. But this was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming out. Sharon, thanks for running this.